Good morning from San Diego, good afternoon if it's afternoon where you're listening. Welcome to the Manchester is Red podcast with myself, Tyrone Marshall, excuse me, joined by Samuel Luckhurst. The croakiness of voice in the voice, a sign of the tiredness from another day of travelling yesterday. We have left New York and travelled west and landed in San Diego, gained 3 extra, arguably unwanted hours in the day yesterday, so all a bit all over the place at the moment. We're recording this at 8 a.m. on our first full day in San Diego when we landed yesterday, so everything a bit all over the place in terms of travel. But Samuel, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Fortunately, I avoided an afternoon nap yesterday, so my body clock isn't too bad. I had a pretty good night's sleep, although you slept through it, but there was a power cut in our hotel, and then I heard some footsteps outside my door, and I started having dreadful thoughts. But no, the power's working, and San Diego looks lovely where we are anyway, by the sea harbour.
It does, yeah.
Good to come somewhere new.
Absolutely, and it's a very traditional American motel, isn't it? It is the type of place you can imagine being used for filming someone coming into your room and murdering you.
Yeah. Well, the outside of it, we've ribbed Simon Peach about this because he recommended it, and I think when myself, you and Paul Hurst turned up, I was having visions of the Bates Motel and 12 rooms, 12 vacancies, and mother being upstairs in the house overlooking us. But no, fortunately, so far so good. Yes,
it's all been good, and like I said, we've moved on because United have left New York, or New Jersey more aptly. They were based in New Jersey, but obviously New York sounds a lot more attractive. Finished that element of the tour with the game against Arsenal at the MetLife on Saturday night. An incredible stadium. First time I've been there, I thought it was an absolutely amazing stadium. Right. So beautiful in its construction. Inside just looked like it went on forever. Fantastic place for a game of football. 82,200 people there. And on the pitch, a very good performance from United. Another win, 3 wins in pre-season now, 3 clean sheets. Don't want to get too carried away with pre-season and how results go, but it was a pretty decent performance from United, first half especially. It feels like these pre-season games always follow the same pattern, where the first half is okay, and then once all the changes come, it feels like you lose the structure and lose the narrative, and it was a bit patchy in the second half, but first half, a pretty decent performance from United, and Ten Hag probably happy with what he saw.
Yeah, it was very watchable. I mean, he was happy, although he didn't look happy at half time because he was remonstrating with the fourth official, and we chatted to him informally afterwards for a little bit, and he said he had to explain to the referee where he was going wrong. He thought there were a few dubious calls, but it was a good contest, and that was the main thing. Arsenal put out a strong side. United were probably 3 players away from what you consider to be their strongest available 11. You might have thrown Rashford, Casemiro, maybe another in there. But given the way the game panned out, the opportunities, I thought Aaron Ramsdale was culpable for both goals, really, in different ways. But Jadon Sancho's goal, the way he took it, I mean, he's starting to gradually build some momentum, some rhythm in this false 9 role, which he's having to play in just because Ten Hag's hand has been forced. He doesn't have a striker available to him at hand at the moment. Marshall, they think, is going to come back into team training in the coming days, but I think most of us out here would be surprised if he plays, just because of how cautious United have been with his comebacks from previous injuries. So with Sancho's goal, the first touch was excellent. The second touch, it gave Gabriel a bit of a chance. I thought, maybe he's going to get closed down here, but then just rifled it. He couldn't have hit it any better. No. So he asked the question of the keeper. The keeper couldn't answer it. Tom Heaton, I know he's not exactly going to be a main takeaway as a 37-year-old number 2 at best for the forthcoming season, but he was good with his hands, he was good with his feet, and that was probably, it was the top line, it was the intro in my paragraph, that they've signed a new goalkeeper, but even without him, they're trying to play the way he plays, and it's almost as if the days now of problematic distribution from the penalty area, that they are likely over now for United, irrespective of who the goalkeeper is. I mean, even last season when Martin Dubravka was in goal, he was clearly very, very uncomfortable with the ball at his feet on his couple of appearances. I think it was for United. It was a strange signing, and one that ended short for probably the better. And of course, it'd be remiss not to mention Kobbie Mainoo. I think he got 2 assists technically, because it was his hooked ball over the top that Gabriel had an air shot at, but just the positions he takes up, his desire to get on the ball. Sometimes he drops so deep. United are playing a back three, but that confidence to take the ball from your own third and play it into the opponent's third, and to just pop up in different areas, whether it's deep, whether it's high up. Very, very impressive. We've seen breakthroughs in inverted commas, if you like, for academy players on these tours before, whether it was Greenwood in 2019, Zidane Iqbal last year, Andres Pereira had a couple of tours where he was very good. But now it looks like they were full storms. Well, they certainly were full storms. In the case of Mainu, you don't get the impression this is a full storm. You get the impression that this is a player who, all being well, will be in the United midfield for a number of years to come. Yeah,
definitely. I mean, it was interesting that midfield, in terms of the battle between both teams, was 5 internationals and Kobbie Mainoo on Saturday, and he did not look out of place at all. You think he was up against Declan Rice, Kai Havertz, Martin Odegaard, had Bruno Fernandes and Mason Mount on his own team, and he looked of a level with them basically, and did really well for the first goal. When Tom Heaton got praised by the manager as well, and like saying that informal chat with Ten Hag after the game, we asked about Kobbie Mainoo, and I think there's a sense that he doesn't want to get carried away and overburden him, but
exactly.
He did talk about what a good test it was, and I think you said on the podcast we did last week that it would be good for him to play the half where Arsenal's best midfield plays.
Yeah, where Rice was playing. Yeah. Exactly.
And that's what happened, and I thought it was really good. Quite interesting. There's some interesting tactical stuff in these friendlies, and thought first off, especially the use of the fullbacks was quite interesting. We saw him put them in midfield last year. This first 45 minutes, Sean and Wan-Bissaka were basically playing in possession as number 8s or even as high as strikers at some point. And really moving in field and into very, very advanced positions, almost attacking with 6 players. And Kobbie Mainoo was kind of dropping back into a back 3 to cover that. So some interesting stuff tactically with that, and the fact that Kobbie Mainoo can do that shows what talent United think he is. I mean, I think there's a real argument there that I know we've done the line that McTominay is one of those players that could leave if they got an offer. Looking at players like Sofian Amrabat as a potential replacement. I mean, Mainoo could arguably step up next season, I think, if McTominay went and play that role. He's one who's not going out on loan. He is a first team player. And we spoke to Tom Heaton as well after the game, and I thought there was some interesting stuff there. I've just got the transcript out actually to look at it, because he was quite interested on Onana and how good he is with his feet. But when I was reading it back, something that struck me was, I think you asked him first off about the goal, and when United scored that first goal, it came from Heaton, and Ten Hag kind of looked at him and clenched both fists and shouted Tom. And Heaton said in his answer that that was something Ten Hag wanted last year, and I think he said he wants to take it on again this season, which is almost doubling down on playing out from the back, which makes sense with Onana. And also interesting from Heaton about his own future. I mean, there's a story online now about Onana and what he's had to say, but it sounds very much like he wants to. I think it's fair to say probably he wants to leave the club. He said there was still a real desire to play. He's 37 now. United took the option on his contract, and I think they took the option because basically there was no other option in terms of a goalkeeper, was there, at that point. The uncertainty meant they had to take his option. We know Luton have been interested in making him their number 1, and the answer he gave to the questions towards the end suggested that there's a real hunger to play, and even just playing against Arsenal in a friendly reinforced that desire. And he's of an age where keepers can go on a little longer, but he's maybe got 1 or 2 years left, and I think he wants to go and play. And it's, although they've got Onana in as the number 1, there's still a lot of uncertainty in that goalkeeper group, isn't there? Because Henderson's, I think, certainly going to go. Heaton clearly wants to go, and arguably United owe him that chance to go and play. De Gea's left. I mean, you're almost looking at 3 new goalkeepers this season. It's still a strange position, that group, isn't it?
It is, and it seems like every picture the club puts out of Dean Henderson, he's smiling broadly and really happy. And I don't know if I said this before in a podcast, but there was a case at another club where this young player was complaining about what a toxic environment it was, and how the senior professionals were quite nasty really, and not particularly pleasant. He was going out for training one day, and one of them spotted the club photographer, saw the player, went up to him, arm around his shoulder, big smiles. Obviously the player smiles as well because you're on camera, pictures taken, and then he clears off. And it just portrays a false image. And I don't think anybody can really seriously think that Dean Henderson is happy with the situation. I mean, I suppose at the moment he is still coming back from injury and he's still recovering to an extent. He is training, but he's clearly not match fit. I think by the time he does play again, it will have been 3 months out, which is what was reported at the time that he had the thigh surgery back in early May. And we still don't know if they're going to bring another goalkeeper in, because there's we'll get onto it shortly, of course. There will be a striker coming in, but then there are a number of positions there, squad role positions, competition positions, if you like, where there could be an addition. And you look in that squad, it could be a centre-back, it could be a goalkeeper. At the start of the summer, or certainly before the window opened, there was a decent chance they were looking at a right-back. But then I think Wan-Bissaka's form, the way that's gone, it would have to be a really compelling case for something to transpire there, and all the noises coming out from United of that, you know, Wan-Bissaka's going nowhere, and at the moment he's the first choice right back, and he has been for a long time. There's Ten Hag wants another forward as well, so that's 4 or 5 different positions. Midfielders, of course, 4 or 5 different positions where they could bring, not padding, but a competitor for one of the starters, because there are a lot of players there who could be sold. That clear out it has started effectively. Tellez has gone. By hook or by crook will go, but he's such an irrelevance anyway, because he's not on the tour, he's not in the plans. Henderson will probably go. Maguire has really got to just swallow his pride and accept that he's not Man United standard, and go to a club that is more his level. With McTominay, I think Ten Hag, he's one of those players that Ten Hag will genuinely be quite content with if he stayed, because he is a squad player. But if they get a 30 million offer, they have to accept it. They have to sell him, and then you reinvest it in the replacement. Elanga's going as well. I'm not sure if Elanga is even still out here yet. I've not, given the time zone difference and travelling, I've not bothered to check in whether he was at Pingry School yesterday. But that's practically done as well. So, with Elanga, there's not really a cause to bring in a replacement for him, because he was so far on the periphery, so far on the fringes. He was only in the FA Cup final squad because of injuries to other forwards. I think it's 1 start in the last 8 months for him at Man United as well. So it was pretty obvious why they were happy to let him go. But with the goalkeeping situation, I think there'd be a bit too much. We've not even mentioned Mate Kovar, but if Henderson, Kovar and Heaton all go, that's quite a big turnaround. And I suppose Ten Hag would be comfortable with that, because he'd be recruiting at least 2 goalkeepers very much in his image, who are very proactive with the ball at their feet and underpinning attacks and whatnot. But you watch Heaton, and I've said this before, we've both said this before during competitive games and whatnot. I still think that, given that he's got a year left in his contract, I think he's a worthy number 2. Yeah. I don't see him as some Scott Carson competition winner who blanks people in the mix zone and has done next to nothing in his career. Heaton's actually had a good career for what the playing time he's had. But I think he's worthy of that status. But the Ten Hag thinks differently. He told me last season, he said the number 2 and number 3. He says, I don't have a number 2 and a number 3. I just have backup goalkeepers, and I think that's it's a strange thought process, and maybe he's shifted on that now. But I think he's still very much working off that experience at Ajax in his last season, when Onana was suspended for a large portion of it. Stecklenburg got injured. It was a long-term injury as well at the start of the season. And I can't remember the guy's name, but he was like a 38-year-old with a ponytail, and you don't want a 38-year-old with a ponytail in goal for the majority of your season. But they did win the league, so and they were looking at signing Dean Henderson then as well. So that's how strange things go in football. But I still think that's on his mind still, and he did mention that when they brought Butland in on loan last season. Yeah,
definitely. Right, that's all for part 1 of the Manchester Red podcast. We'll be back after this break to talk about those strikers. Welcome back to the Manchester is Red podcast. We discussed transfers briefly in the first part then, and the potential number of incomings and how uncertain things are in certain positions. What we do know is they definitely want a striker, and a striker is absolutely essential. You did the story last night, Samuel, UK time. Harry Kane and kind of Tottenham's position there of basically wanting to avoid losing him on a free. I guess it's Mbappe-esque really with what PSG are doing as well, in terms of they don't want to lose him on a free. It's sell or extend if possible. I mean, what is the situation there? Talk us through that story, I guess, and what the situation is at the moment.
Well, a few of us did it, and the information gathered, it is first and foremost, it's a Tottenham story because it's Daniel Levy, the chairman, being issued an ultimatum by Joe Lewis, the owner, that you must sell Kane or you must tie him down on a new contract. And I think I said that in a podcast a few weeks ago, a couple of months ago, whenever it was, that there would surely come a point where, given how often money talks in football, that Joe Lewis taps Daniel Levy on the shoulder and says, you have got to sell this guy because there are tens of millions, the best part of 100 million at stake here. And I don't think, Levy has done this before with Christian Eriksen, where he chanced his arm, and eventually they did get a fee, but it wasn't much of a fee when he went to Inter Milan. But as good a player as Christian Eriksen is and was at that time, he is not Harry Kane. And I think it was alluded to in that Tottenham documentary when they were discussing that kind of situation and the valuation of each other as well, which I thought, I didn't think footballers would even bother with that. It seems a bit too tedious for footballers to discuss such a topic. But Kane is almost certainly not going to sign a contract at Tottenham. Why would he? They've not won a trophy since 2008. He's done everything in his power to try and improve them. He's the club's record scorer, etc., etc. Like he's got to be sold effectively in the next 5 or 6 weeks before the transfer window closes on September the 1st. And Bayern Munich remain the only club to have bid for him because, as we wrote earlier in the summer, United were discouraged from bidding for Kane because Tottenham were absolutely adamant that they would not sell him to a Premier League rival. Fine. And United also did not want to get into playing games with Daniel Levy as well because, I mean, Sir Alex Ferguson said it himself, dealing with Levy was more painful than my hip replacement. It's just inadvisable, and if you've got alternative targets, which United have, you move on to them, which they have done with Rasmus Højlund, who's the principal target still, and you've got Randall Kolo Muani as an alternative target. Ten Hag likes Mohamed Kudus at Ajax. Victor Osimhen was in the conversation, but everyone has been put off because he's a more valuable striker than Kane. So, fair enough. There's always this slight opportunity, this slight chance that if it gets to a point where United have not got a striker and Tottenham, at the end of the day, their hand is forced, Levy's hand is forced, and he has to sell, why would United not be interested in a world-class striker who is Premier League proven, and he's the kind of striker as well that if you did sign him, that he's not one of these players coming in who has to adapt to how we play, our patterns of play, blah blah blah, because he's too good to do that. He can do that in a heartbeat, no problem. So it is still, I still do not expect necessarily Harry Kane to sign for United. I remember when another outlet did a report on how United were interested in Rice, Mount and Kane this summer. As I said at the time, they'll do well to get one of them, and they have got one of them. And I still think by the end of the summer, they'll have ended up out of the three with only Mount. But I say only Mount. I think it's good going just to have got Mount. But you come back to it. A lot of United fans will be thinking, if you're prepared to pay big money for a 20-year-old with a modest goal scoring record in Italy, and you've got one of the best strikers in the last 10 years who is still operating at an extremely high level and could cost you 30, 40 million pounds more, why would you not be prioritising him? It's a legitimate question to ask, and although United have, they're not pushing whatsoever a narrative with Kane. As I said, that story, it was a Tottenham story first and foremost, but United have to be still in the conversation on the slight off chance that Daniel Levy, I don't know, someone gives him a brain transplant, and he's of the mindset that it would be a good idea to sell Harry Kane to an English club. On the off chance that happens, they have to be in the conversation for it, because any serious club would be. I mean, Real Madrid were looking at Kane earlier in the summer. Things have changed there because of Mbappe, and I think if Real Madrid have the option, Mbappe or Kane, it's Mbappe all day long. So I still suspect he'll end up at Bayern Munich, and if that's the case, that puts pressure not just on United to sign a striker, but it puts pressure on that striker coming in, because if you're the guy who joins Man United in the same summer Harry Kane has actually left Tottenham, that's another burden to shoulder, as well as leading the line at United.
Absolutely. I mean, Harry Kane is the greatest guarantee of goals in the Premier League you're going to get, whereas Rasmus Højlund is a 20-year-old who's had 3 clubs in 18 months. He's clearly very talented, but I don't think there's any guarantee that he comes in and even guarantees you 15 Premier League goals next year. He's understandably very raw. I mean, I guess Atlanta's sort of intransience over Højlund at the moment could help United. I mean, United are still absolutely adamant that they're not interested in Kane. I was going to say they don't want Kane. Obviously, they do want Kane. They're not interested because they don't think it's going to happen. But like you say, if there comes a point next week where Bayern Munich offer £80 million and Tottenham say OK, surely United just offer 85. No, we're kind of speculating here, but do you let Bayern Munich make the running?
I don't think they would do that necessarily. I think that if that was to happen, I think you are regressing 10 years back to what Ed Woodward was doing when they did actually outbid Real Madrid for Gareth Bale when he made a world record move there. But I mean, they couldn't see the wood for the trees, because I mean, even I knew 6 months before Bale made that move he wanted to go to Real Madrid, and everyone knew that he wanted to go to Real Madrid, and he was going to go to Real Madrid. But that was Daniel Levy. He dragged out the most obvious big transfer ever, to the final day of the transfer window, because he wanted to extract as much money from the deal as possible. And he led United down a garden path, really. But United were so naive that they couldn't, not David Moyes or Ed Woodward, they couldn't actually accept that Bale wanted to go to Real Madrid, which was so naive. It's incredible, really, that that's the way they operated, because Moyes was an experienced manager as well at the time. You do your due diligence. Does the player want to join you? No, he wants to join Real Madrid. Okay, that's it. But Levy was encouraging them. It was like, bid, go for it. You've got a chance here. And then Real Madrid have to up theirs a little bit more and a bit more and a bit more, and he gets a world record fee out of it. And I suspect Madrid were trying to avoid that, because they had the mother of all egos in the dressing room in Ronaldo, who was the world's most expensive player at that time. And I remember Jonathan Barnett, Bale's agent, saying in an interview some years later how he used to rib Jorge Mendes, Ronaldo's agent at the time, about the fact that he negotiated a world record deal for Gareth Bale. So those things, they do matter. I mean, the question would have to be asked of United, like if Tottenham are in, if they get to that realm of actually accepting a bid from Bayern Munich, are you going to act here? Because this is a player who has been of interest and is still of some sort of interest, like minor interest. We know that you've got your principal target and other options that you see as more attainable, but you have to make exceptions if you are a serious football club. Will you, it's a test of nerve, really, but I don't even see it as a test of nerve. It's like if they've got the funds, if you want to be competitive, and we've not even touched on it, Ten Hag's preferred, if he could have any striker in the world, it's Harry Kane.
Well, this is it. Ten Hag wants Kane, and Kane wants United. If Harry Kane had an option of Bayern Munich or Man United, he'd choose Man United. I guess that's the difference with Bale, isn't it? And if it ends up that Kane goes to Bayern Munich this summer, you've got to ask the question of why were United not there? I mean, the only reason is that Levy is so desperate not to sell to a Premier League club, but money talks, and at the end of the day, it's arguably not Levy's decision either. We've said it's Joe Lewis's decision. So
exactly.
I do think there's a situation there where if Kane signs for Bayern Munich, you're kind of perplexed as to why have United not made that happen and got involved, especially when your alternatives are gambles essentially. I think Rasmus Højlund is going to be a gamble if he is the one they stick on.
There's a lot of context to it that hopefully we've covered as much as possible there, that has got overlooked by some people who are just too emotionally invested in these things, whether it's fans on Twitter or certain staff members maybe. So you try and cover all bases. We've reported it faithfully, accurately. So as I said, I still see Kane going to Bayern Munich, but it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out if or when this striker comes in at United, how he copes in the summer that Harry Kane has actually left Tottenham. Yeah,
definitely. And talking to strikers, we went to see Erik ten Hag on Friday. I think we did the last podcast on Thursday in New York. Friday we went to Pingree School in New Jersey. Amazing facilities. There, and really interesting actually to speak to some of the staff there as well. Great school facilities, and began hosting football clubs at the World Cup in 1994 when they had Italy, who went to reach the final. We spoke to Erik ten Hag. His press conference, there was a lot of talk about strikers. He wouldn't get dragged into talking about Harry Kane, but he obviously did say that they want a striker and they need a striker. Quite a lot of topics covered actually. Quite illuminating press conference, and United let it run. I think everyone got their question, and there was a lot of interesting stuff there. I mean, one of the forwards he touched on at the end was Mason Greenwood, where basically said that he has given his views on what he thinks should happen. He didn't tell us what they were, but you've done the story that he wants to keep him, really.
Doesn't want to sell him.
Yeah, I think the way he answered the question certainly suggested that he wants that. But he did say it's a club decision, and we have to accept that club decision. I mean, it's a club decision that's taken a while to come to, but it's going to be an interesting one, especially now Ten Hag has had his say, because I think we all get the impression that Ten Hag is the role of manager here, and Ten Hag is very powerful at United, isn't it?
Yeah, and when we were having some lunch yesterday, we were discussing Højlund, and he's younger than Greenwood, and their strike conversion rate is somewhat similar. Greenwood's played in the Premier League, and people who are desperate for Mason Greenwood to be back in the Man United team could make a case that well why not just integrate him, because this is the way you're going. But I still have severe doubts that Mason Greenwood will play for United again, even if they try to. The intention is to put him out on loan, but however long this cooling off period from when he last played, however long you could leave it, if it gets to the point where he's training with the Man United first team squad again and he's about to play for Manchester United, that is going to be probably leading the item on the news at 10. In the UK, that's a national story. There would be worldwide interest in it, and there's no point getting into what the reaction could be about over it, because that would be hypothetical. But essentially, the intention is for him to go out on loan. But where that will be, Atalanta have shown some interest because he's come up in conversation during the Højlund discussions. But it's still pretty staggering that we've got to this point and United have not made a decision on him. And I think loaning him is a bit of a cop-out. I can see the issues in getting rid of him. Obviously, there are legal issues there. I can see also, more severely, the issues of reintegrating him back into the squad, arguably. So there's a lot of... They've clearly weighed up a lot of things, and it's been discussed. But I still am pretty staggered that here we are in late July and there's not been a clear-cut decision made there, because I think it's in the best interests of all parties to do one thing or another, but United, it seems, are trying to do something in the middle of it by allowing him to go out on loan, and then you kick the can down the road. And even it's minor in comparison, but with Dean Henderson, they've been kicking that can down the road for years and years as well. And over whether he's going to be a Man United number one goalkeeper. Now it seems like he's not going to be, and he will probably be sold. That's just another example of it. But as you said, I think his answer was, it wasn't exactly cryptic. I think it alluded to his outlook on it, which is that he doesn't want to sell him, and the compromise is, okay, we loan him. So I can see why that's the case. But at another football club, I think the football director or the technical director they are pulling rank there and saying no, this is what we're doing.
Yeah.
But it is a unique situation for reasons that everybody is obviously aware of.
Yeah, I guess the difficulty with a loan is how you phrase it, because they have said there is this internal investigation, this internal review to find out what's happened, and once you've started that, and they have to do that, I guess you need a definitive outcome, don't you? And a loan is, like you say, is kind of in the middle. So I guess it's how you phrase that as which way they come down. It feels like at the end of an internal investigation is fairly black or white, isn't it? Whereas a loan is probably a shade of grey. Excuse me. I mean, the other fairly newsy thing that Ten Hag mentioned was that he planned to speak informally to the Glazers while he was over here. Thing that happened in New York. It's a question about the takeover. I thought it was quite interesting the way he answered it, and I've kind of done a piece that some people may have read this morning about. It feels like his tone is very much changing with takeover stuff. I think in the first, it was announced in November. He got asked a few times early in the second half of the season, and just kind of just didn't get involved, did he? It was very much club decision. Nothing I can do. Nothing I can say. Whereas now on Friday he's saying, it's obvious I can give my opinion and give my views, and I mean, I'm not sure it is obvious that the manager would give his opinion on a takeover.
And they wouldn't care as well.
Yeah, exactly. So, I didn't think that was obvious. I thought it was quite interesting that he was saying, I will give them my views, when in reality it's a private transaction between the Glazers and whoever they decide to sell to. We didn't know at that point that he'd actually already spoken to Avram Glazer, who'd been at training a couple of times, was at the game, no sign of Joel. We did also, you did a story sort of sourced while we were in New York. Quite interested in United being there, really, when obviously they're on the New York Stock Exchange. It's the financial hub of the world. Arguably, Reign are based there. It's all covered in the story. I'm sure readers and listeners can go and find it if they want to. But I guess the gist of it is that we're 8 months in, and still no one has the slightest idea what is going on. With citizens that Reign almost feel like they've been told to sell something that's not actually on the market. It went to market with a split between the siblings. We've written that a lot now, between the two, Joel and Avram, who quite enjoy owning United and want to stay, and the other four who want to cash in their chips and get the hell out of Dodge, I guess. But it's absolutely staggering that this is still going on, that Reign don't know what's happening, that the buyers don't know what's happening. I know we've talked about the takeover a lot, but Now we've moved on from New York. I guess it were calm in America, but the situation is essentially a shambles, isn't it? Yeah,
I mean, people we've spoken to who are involved in the financial world, they're of the opinion that a strategic review should be concluded within 60 to 90 days. And here we are. It's gone 8 months since the announcement, and I don't think anybody of us, I don't think any of us were expecting it to be concluded as swiftly as that. But we certainly expected it to be done well by this point, and it always comes back to the issue that I wrote a while ago. The two main brothers, Avram and Joel, whose names are in the programme for home games, the co-chairman, they don't want to sell Man United, and ideally, I think for them, they would get some investors coming in. That would probably be their preference. I mean, it was interesting the way it's described to us by someone. He said that they view United as like art at Freeport, which is where these beautiful works of art are kept, and it's a tax. You're not paying tax on it, and they just they want it for the money, not the beauty of it. And it was quite a good analogy. And the fact that Reign are actually talking to people and saying that we feel like we've been sold a pup here, really, in a way. But for them, nobody had heard of the Reign Group before. I mean, people maybe writing Chelsea stories would have, but you type Reign Group into Google now and it comes up Manchester United. So Manchester United have put the Reign Group on the map. They, as negative as it may seem for them, it's also probably win-win, because there's a good chance that when the next major European club want to have a strategic review, Reign will be tasked with overseeing it, or maybe they won't be, given the outcome that there could be from the United one. But I mean, Avram Glazer, actually, it was probably the closest any of us have ever been to him. He walked past us in the mix zone the other night, and Laurie Whitwell caught up with him, just asked him, and he said, I'm here to enjoy the game. And then security stepped in, I mean, I don't know which other games he'll be at, but he seems to be the most prominent one now. I mean, for all we're told that Joel is involved in the day-to-day running and he gives his input and blah blah blah. He's not been at a game, friendly or competitive, since April 2019, and he's very much in the background now. If a Glazer sibling is getting doorstepped by Sky News journalists at Davros or in Florida where they live, it's Avram Glazer.
Yeah.
They can't seem to actually get to Joel Glazer anymore. I think the only sightings of him have been at Tampa Bay Buccaneers games. He seems to be, although he's apparently prominently involved with the day-to-day running of United, it's the Tampa Bay Bucks where you see him. So I think the piece we did this week, with the information that we gathered and collated and then knocked into shape, it was something different from what's, as I've said a number of times, less is more with this takeover story, because so much of it has been nonsense. I think a lot of it, and there's been a lot of peddling agendas there. I suppose the only other interesting aspect that we wrote about was how Joel and Avram took a very dim view, to say the least, of Sir Jim Ratcliffe trying to buy out the other siblings to gain control, and that might account for why Sir Jim Ratcliffe, when he speaks about Joel and Avram Glazer in public, he's extremely polite about them. It's almost too polite, really, the way he's almost gushing about them and when he's spoken with them. But he did actually say, I think the last time, speaking with 6 siblings, you can't do it, and that's always been the issue. I think from the outset, you've got 6 individuals there, they're all going to want something different. The chances are, and that's the case. I mean, there was rancour there going to market in November, and they still can't find common ground more than 8 months on. So, I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if 8 months on from this, there's still no resolution there. But it's been suggested that the New York Stock Exchange could intervene and say, look, you've got to make a decision, because it's not good for the New York Stock Exchange for shares to be fluctuating based on rumour.
Yeah, absolutely. Right, that's all for part 2. We'll be back for part 3 shortly to talk about the 2 fixtures this week. Welcome back to the Manchester is Red podcast. The road trip has moved on to San Diego, as I mentioned before. United 2 more fixtures this week. Quite an unusual setup. A game here on Tuesday at the Snapdragon Stadium against Wrexham, of all teams, and then a game on Wednesday in Houston against Real Madrid. Quite different opposition there in successive nights. It is a youth team and Johnny Evans, basically, I think, that is playing against Wrexham. It's a little bit unclear, I think, really, still on who exactly is going to be in that team and who's going to be managing it. I don't think we even know who's going to be managing it at the moment, do we?
No, it looks like the young players are out here already as well, and they've been in California for a few days. But we've got a press conference to attend in how many hours? 6-7 hours, which is previewing the Wrexham game and the Real Madrid game. So I would imagine they'll clarify it there. Yeah,
and the Wrexham game first. I mean, it's like we say, it's difficult to really know who's going to be involved. I guess that theoretically there could be some fringe players. There was a few players who didn't even get on Saturday, wasn't it? I think Donny van der Beek, Dan Gore. Yeah. So a few players didn't get on. You're at the stage now where certainly those players who've been back since day one of pre-season, Mason Mount, Wan-Bissaka, Varane, Martinez, are at a point where they could probably play 60 minutes and are probably due to start playing 60 minutes. Yeah. So I guess theoretically you could slightly mix the teams up, but in terms of the Wrexham game, a difficult one to know who's going to be involved, and a strange game in general. I think there's going to be a lot of interest in Wrexham. I think they played LA Galaxy's reserves the other day, and there's barely anyone there. But the fact Wrexham are over here, it's quite an unusual one, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, Simon Peach was on their flight coming out here, and he said, I think, that on the flight they were in cattle class, but then when they got off the plane they were like rock stars, and he said that one one fan told the backup goalkeeper, "You're the reason my son wants to be a goalkeeper," which is quite a charming story. So I think the game's a sellout, which you'd expect it to be. I don't think it's a particularly big stadium. No. You've got that cachet of United's name, even though you're not going to have the players to go with it. And Wrexham is a story. It's the story that's going to run and run as well, because I don't think anybody sees them getting relegated next season. As hilarious as that might be, I suspect Ryan Reynolds will be there. Maybe Rob McElhenney. I think I've managed to remember his name now. He used to just be the other guy, but we do him a disservice. He's a very successful man in his industry, and Julia Roberts was at the United Arsenal game, so we'll have to see if there are any other Hollywood A-listers who come up for that game. I think that might make it more interesting if there are any actors or actresses that are of interest to us, rather than just watching a game of football consistent of academy players. So. Yeah, I think there are some of us on our trip out here, in terms of those players playing, they will not know them from Adam. They will never have heard of them either. So that I suppose that puts us slightly in advantage. I won't have to be checking the team sheet all the time, wondering who the hell is Willie Kamwala or who the hell is Will Fish. Although Will Fish did he did go viral for all the wrong reasons on tour last year when he was sent off, unfortunately. Yeah,
I mean, we at the MEN, we obviously do phenomenal coverage of the academy, arguably better than the club's official website, so we would always be doing this game. I think it's fair to say that some nationals would, if United were playing Real Madrid in San Diego and Wrexham in Houston, I think some people wouldn't feel the need to make the trip. And it is, we're going to Houston for 20 hours. It is quite a draining experience, and it's another time zone, another 2 hours, so it is going to be a very hectic and busy couple of days. But the Real Madrid game is I guess it's the A-lister of the tour. It's the big game. We went out for something to eat last night and then had a drink afterwards in a local bar here, a very quiet area of San Diego, and we were actually watching Real Madrid AC Milan last night. An entertaining pre-season friendly. I think Real won 3-2 in the end, of him in 2-0 down. 2-0 down at half time. A very good squad out, and that's going to be a real fascinating game to see where both teams are at. Real certainly looked to be taking that game very seriously last night. They looked to be quite far along in terms of pre-season. I think they played, their players were playing more. I think it was more than a split half for sure. And the other factor is Jude Bellingham. I think he played around about an hour last night, maybe. And there's going to be a lot to sort of take away from that game, isn't it? It's going to be fascinating to see Bellingham. Obviously, United have had an interest in him in the past, and just for United to compare themselves against Real at this stage of pre-season.
Yeah, I mean, Madrid's players, the calibre, it speaks for itself. I mean, Vinicius looked very good again last night. I mean, he's such a good player that amid their obsession with Mbappe, fair enough, sign Mbappe because he's world class, but don't do it at Vinicius' expense, because I think he's such a tremendous player. And his first tour with Madrid was out here in the States, and he played against United. I remember seeing him in Miami for the first time, thinking he looks a really good player, and he's gone from strength to strength, and already he's had a great career. I suppose in terms of these games and what Ten Hag does with them, does there come a point when he starts to play Casemiro with Mount, or does he really want to give Kobbie Mainoo his kudos, really, because he's deserved to continue starting games and keep his place? But is he seriously looking at him as a starter against Wolves? I mean, it feels like somewhat of a stretch at the moment, but maybe in a couple of games down the road, maybe it won't be a stretch, and there comes a point, and it's happened before, players who come back to pre-season later than others, that playing catch up, it can cost them when it comes into the start of the season. And I remember 6 years ago, Mourinho, I asked him the question about it as well, because he seemed to be obsessively playing Smalling and Lindelof as one centre-half pairing, and Phil Jones and Eric Bailly. Phil Jones and Eric Bailly were the starting ones, and Lindelof and Smalling were playing other parts of games, whether it was a half or 30 minutes, and he was just playing them religiously in those two pairings. And he said, you'll find out soon, you'll find out soon enough. And it was because Jones was going to be suspended for, I think, the Super Cup, because he had a go at someone who wanted to take a doping test from him after the Europa League final. So the Super Cup, he played Smalling and Lindelof. Come the first game of the season, it was Bailly, Jones and Lindelof, the new signing, was not even in the squad. So that's how seriously, to an extent, managers can take pre-season when they've got every player available, because you are building up a rapport between players who not haven't. I mean, Jones and Bailly would not have played a lot of football with each other the previous season because, Christ, I mean, is there a more brittle pairing than Phil Jones and Eric Bailly? It's remarkable that they actually played together at all, but that's just an indicator of how much these games can be valued by managers, even though we watch them and we think, okay, he did well, but he's got to do it in August and when the competitive action starts. I mean, Ten Hag played a very strong side against Arsenal. I'm not quite sure what the rationale was behind not starting Rashford and starting Garnacho, but I suppose Rashford played through the middle, and again, that's something that Ten Hag is probably looking at and thinking, I need to give him some minutes up top there at the moment whilst we've not got a striker, because I don't think across. I mean, I think United have. When's the Borussia Dortmund game? Is that on Sunday?
Sunday, yeah.
So they actually this time next week they'll be home, and I don't think any of us is expecting Anthony Marshall to play in any game this week, because United. There was a point last season when he came back from injury and he had 4 weeks. He was fit for 4 weeks and he'd been in team training, but he wasn't getting picked in games because they didn't want to rush him back. So I can't really see Ten Hag bringing him back into either the Madrid game or the Dortmund game in Las Vegas. So you are working with players who are not strikers really, and you need them to just not adapt as such, but refamiliarise themselves with that role, because Rashford we all know, is better on the left. We all know Sancho is better as a winger, and it's not a great position to be in that sense, but that's where they are, and I certainly don't really see them signing a striker who will be coming out here either. Even if they do sign a striker this week, I think it would be a stretch for them to say, come out here for just to watch effectively. I mean, they signed 2 players while we were on tour last year, and neither of them came out to Australia. Yeah,
absolutely. Ericsson and Martinez both signed and didn't come, didn't they? And obviously that's, I was going to say, a longer journey. Obviously can't fly direct to Australia really from Manchester, but you could make the point, I guess, that they could come here. But like you say, I think the signing would need to be done by tomorrow, basically, to have any chance. And I think that's pretty clear that's not going to be the case. Right, that's all for this episode of the Manchester is Red podcast. I believe there will be someone doing a podcast maybe on Wednesday between the 2 games, between the Wrexham game and the Real Madrid game that night. Myself and Samuel will be back with you probably on Friday, I think. Like I say, a busy week this week, flying to Houston Wednesday, game Wednesday night, flying back from Houston Thursday. So I imagine we'll reconvene back in San Diego on Friday to we'll look back at both of those fixtures, try and provide a bit more insight from what's been going on stateside, and then look ahead to the final game of the tour, which will be Borussia Dortmund. But for now, that's everything. Thanks for tuning in.